The words lasted less than 5 seconds. The regret would last much longer. The Grand Hall of Valor stretched beneath a ceiling of living crystal that reflected the light of distant stars. Thousands of suspended lights drifted through the air like glowing constellations. Foreign ambassadors filled the marble terraces. Military officers stood motionless along the walls. Noble houses watched from elevated balconies draped in silver banners. At the center of it all stood Princess Vane, heir to one of the most powerful empires in known space. Her sapphire-blue skin shimmered beneath the crystal light. Silver-white hair flowed across ceremonial robes embroidered with golden symbols of her royal bloodline. Every eye in the chamber followed her movements. Every voice lowered when she spoke. That was the privilege of being born into power. Directly across from her stood Nathan Brooks. No royal title. No noble lineage. Just a human representative from Earth. Dark suit. Calm expression. Hands folded behind his back. To most people in the room, he looked unremarkable. That assumption had become surprisingly common over the past 3 years. Nathan attended negotiations, solved disputes, prevented crises, then quietly stepped aside while others accepted recognition. The galaxy admired victories. Nathan specialized in preventing disasters before they happened. Unfortunately, such work rarely attracted attention. Today's meeting had begun like many others. Trade agreements, resource allocations, border concerns, endless diplomacy hidden beneath layers of protocol. Then a minor disagreement escalated. One advisor questioned a shipping proposal. Another challenged economic projections. Voices grew sharper. Tensions spread through the hall. Nathan offered a recommendation. Calm, practical, reasonable. The sort of suggestion he had made countless times before. Under normal circumstances, Aracel might have listened. Today was not normal. The pressure of months weighed heavily on her shoulders. Political rivals watched every decision. Noble families questioned her judgment. Expectations surrounded her from every direction. When Nathan spoke, frustration found an easy target. Aracel turned toward him. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. The hall grew quiet. You would not understand. Nathan stopped speaking. Several advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Aracel continued before anyone could intervene. You are only a human. Silence crashed across the chamber. Complete. Absolute. Even the floating lights seemed frozen in place. The sentence was not loud. It did not need to be. Everyone understood exactly what she meant. Every ambassador. Every noble. Every officer. The words echoed through the vast hall and settled into the silence that followed. Nathan did not move. For several seconds, he simply stood there. The entire palace waited. Some expected anger. Others expected a political response. A few anticipated a diplomatic confrontation that would dominate headlines across multiple systems. Aracel expected something too. She was not entirely sure what, but she expected a reaction. Instead, Nathan looked at her quietly. No hostility. No bitterness. No outrage. Something far worse. Disappointment. The expression lasted only a moment before disappearing completely. Then he lowered his eyes. Around them, nobody spoke. Nobody dared. The silence somehow became heavier than the insult itself. And standing beneath the crystal stars of her ancestors, Princess Aracel suddenly found herself wishing she could take back words that had already been heard by an entire empire. Nobody in the Grand Hall breathed. At least that was how it felt. The silence stretched across polished marble floors and crystal balconies like an invisible weight. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on Nathan Brooks. Ambassadors, advisors, military officers, noble families. Every one of them waited for the same thing. A response. A defense. An argument. Anything. Nathan simply stood there. The light from the living crystal ceiling reflected softly across his face. For several seconds he said nothing. Princess Aracel felt her pulse quicken. She had spoken in anger. The words had left her mouth before reason caught up with emotion. Now they hung in the air between them. Impossible to retrieve. Nathan looked at her quietly. Not with resentment. Not with humiliation. That somehow made everything worse. Around them, whispers threatened to begin but never quite formed. Nobody wanted to be the first person to break the silence. Finally, Nathan nodded once. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible. Then he spoke. I understand, Princess. 3 words. That was all. No accusation. No explanation. No attempt to defend himself. Just 3 simple words delivered with the same calm professionalism he brought to every diplomatic crisis. Aracel blinked. She had prepared herself for resistance. She had not prepared herself for acceptance. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. Then he stepped backward. 1 pace. Then another. The movement felt strangely final. Several advisors shifted uncomfortably. A senior minister opened his mouth as though intending to intervene, then thought better of it. Nathan turned and began walking toward the massive chamber doors. The sound of his footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor. Aracel watched him leave. Part of her wanted to call after him. Another part insisted she had done nothing wrong. Pride and uncertainty battled silently inside her chest. The doors opened. Nathan passed through without looking back. Then he was gone. The hall remained frozen for several more seconds. Eventually, conversation resumed. Cautiously at first, then gradually louder. Trade discussions continued. Reports were presented. Formal proceedings moved forward. Outwardly, the meeting recovered. Yet something had changed. Aracel noticed it immediately. The atmosphere felt different. Colder. One by one, advisors returned to their duties. Yet several avoided meeting her eyes. Others seemed distracted. Even the victory she initially expected refused to materialize. Because there had been no victory, only absence. Hours later, the meeting finally ended. The enormous hall emptied slowly. Foreign delegations departed through side entrances. Palace staff gathered documents and extinguished ceremonial lighting. Aracel remained near the central platform long after everyone else had gone. The crystal ceiling above reflected distant stars across the polished floor. Normally, she found the sight comforting. Tonight it felt strangely hollow. A quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. "Your Highness." Aracel turned. Chancellor Vaylor stood nearby. Elderly, patient, wise enough to know when silence carried more meaning than words. "What is it?" she asked. The old advisor hesitated, then chose his response carefully. Nathan Brooks attended every council session for 3 years. Aracel frowned. "I am aware of that." Vaylor nodded slowly. "Then you may wish to consider why this is the first time the room felt empty while he was still technically present." The statement lingered long after the Chancellor walked away. And standing alone beneath the stars of her empire, Princess Aracel experienced something unfamiliar. Not guilt. Not yet. Something smaller. More dangerous. Doubt. The next morning, Nathan's chair remained empty. It should not have mattered. The Imperial Council chamber contained nearly 50 seats arranged in concentric circles beneath a domed ceiling of translucent crystal. Advisors, ministers, military strategists, and trade representatives filled most of them every day. One empty chair should have disappeared into the background. Instead, it seemed impossible to ignore. Princess Aracel noticed it the moment she entered the room. The chair sat near the lower council tier, reserved for foreign representatives. Simple. Functional. Unremarkable. Just like the human who normally occupied it. She immediately looked away. The meeting began. Reports were presented. Economic forecasts appeared as holographic projections above the central platform. Military logistics were reviewed. Trade routes were discussed. Everything proceeded exactly according to schedule. Yet something felt wrong. Several times Aracel found herself glancing toward the empty chair without realizing it. By the 3rd time, the habit irritated her. Nathan Brooks was not essential to council operations. The empire functioned perfectly well before his arrival. It would function perfectly well after his departure. At least that was what she told herself. Unfortunately, reality proved less cooperative. Halfway through the meeting, a dispute emerged between 2 regional governors regarding transportation allocations. Normally, such disagreements consumed hours. The governors argued. Advisors took sides. Committees formed. Progress slowed. Today followed the same pattern. Voices rose. Data projections multiplied. Everyone seemed eager to defend their position. Then silence briefly settled across the chamber, as if the room itself expected someone to speak. No one did. Aracel frowned. Only then did she realize what was missing. Nathan usually solved problems like this. Not through authority. Not through rank. He simply noticed solutions everyone else overlooked. The realization annoyed her far more than it should have. Eventually, the issue was postponed. Another discussion replaced it. Then another. By the end of the session, very little had actually been accomplished. As council members departed, Aracel remained seated. Frustration lingered beneath the surface. She told herself it had nothing to do with Nathan. The explanation sounded less convincing every time she repeated it. Later that afternoon, she crossed the Eastern Administrative Wing on her way to a diplomatic briefing. Palace staff moved efficiently through polished corridors lined with silver-blue banners. Sunlight filtered through enormous windows overlooking the capital city below. Everything appeared normal. Then she passed Nathan's office. The door stood partially open. Empty. She stopped without intending to. The room beyond looked strangely untouched. A data terminal rested on the desk. Several reports remained neatly organized beside it. A cup sat near the window. The chair behind the desk was pushed inward with careful precision. No dramatic farewell. No angry message. No evidence of resentment. Only absence. Aracel stepped inside. The room felt smaller than she remembered. Simpler. Unlike the elaborate offices occupied by nobles and ministers, Nathan had never decorated the space. No awards. No portraits. No symbols of status. Just work. A palace attendant noticed her standing there. "Your Highness." Aracel glanced toward him. "Where is he?" The attendant hesitated. "Ambassador Brooks submitted a leave request this morning." Her stomach tightened unexpectedly. "How long?" "Indefinite, Your Highness." The answer echoed through the quiet room. "Indefinite. Not a few days. Not a week. Indefinite." For the first time since the argument, something shifted inside her. The feeling was difficult to identify. It was not guilt. Not yet. It felt more like standing in a familiar room and suddenly realizing an important piece of it was gone, and only then beginning to understand how much space it had occupied. 3 days passed, then 5, then 7. Nathan Brooks did not return. The palace continued functioning. Council meetings still convened beneath the crystal domes. Trade ships still entered orbit. Noble houses still argued over policy and prestige. On the surface, nothing had changed. Yet Princess Aracel found herself noticing his absence everywhere. The realization annoyed her. She told herself it was professional concern. Nothing more. Unfortunately, evidence kept appearing. During a meeting with trade ministers, a dispute emerged regarding shipping tariffs between 3 outer systems. The discussion quickly dissolved into competing projections and political maneuvering. Voices rose. Advisors repeated the same arguments in different forms. Nearly an hour passed with no progress. Aracel sat silently, listening. Then she noticed something strange. Several council members kept glancing toward the same empty chair. Not intentionally, almost instinctively. The habit spread across the room. They were waiting for someone who was not there. Eventually, the discussion was postponed. Again, later that afternoon, Aracel reviewed archived reports in the Imperial Records Wing. The chamber stretched for hundreds of feet beneath glowing data towers. Millions of diplomatic records floated within crystalline storage matrices. She had not come searching for Nathan. At least that was what she claimed. Yet somehow she found herself opening file after file containing his name. The first report surprised her. A border dispute resolved peacefully 18 months earlier. Nathan had negotiated the agreement. The official summary credited 3 ministers and a regional governor. Nathan appeared only in a footnote. Aracel frowned. She opened another file. Then another. A supply crisis. A trade disruption. A refugee relocation issue. Again and again the pattern repeated. His work appeared everywhere. His recognition appeared nowhere. Hours passed. The deeper she searched, the more uncomfortable she became. Nathan had spent years solving problems before they reached her desk. Not because he received orders. Because he believed it was necessary. The palace historian eventually approached her. An elderly alien named Varel, who had served the royal family longer than Aracel, had been alive. He noticed the files displayed around her. Interesting reading? Aracel glanced up. Why is his name absent from so many official summaries? Varel smiled faintly. Because he requested it. The answer caught her off guard. Requested it. Repeatedly. The historian folded his hands behind his back. Ambassador Brooks had little interest in public recognition. Aracel stared at the floating records. Why? Varel seemed genuinely surprised by the question. Because solving the problem mattered more to him than receiving credit. The statement lingered in the air. Aracel remembered every noble she had ever known. Every minister. Every advisor. Most spent enormous effort ensuring their accomplishments were visible. Nathan had done the opposite. The realization felt deeply unsettling. That evening, long after sunset, Aracel stood alone on a balcony overlooking the capital city. Millions of lights stretched across the darkness below. Air traffic moved between towering structures like streams of glowing stars. Normally, the view brought comfort. Tonight, it brought reflection. For the first time, she replayed the argument from Nathan's perspective rather than her own. She remembered his expression. Not anger. Not humiliation. Disappointment. The memory hurt more than she expected. Somewhere in the city below, music drifted upward from a celebration. The sound faded into the night air. Aracel remained motionless beneath the stars. Because for the first time since Nathan left, a possibility entered her mind that she had been avoiding. What if the person she insulted had never been beneath her at all? 2 weeks after Nathan left, Princess Aracel stopped pretending his absence did not matter. The realization arrived gradually, not through a single dramatic moment, through dozens of small ones. A report that should have been finished but remained delayed. A disagreement that should have been resolved but continued growing. A diplomatic misunderstanding that somehow became more complicated every time someone attempted to fix it. Nathan had always made difficult things look simple. Only after he was gone did anyone realize how much work that required. The Imperial Council chamber felt different now. Meetings lasted longer. Discussions drifted in circles. Advisors repeated arguments that Nathan once dismantled with a single observation. Nobody mentioned his name openly. They did not need to. His absence had become visible. One afternoon, Aracel found herself standing inside the palace archives again. Rows of crystalline data towers glowed softly in the darkness. Millions of records floated within shimmering fields of light. She had returned searching for answers she could not quite define. A senior archivist guided her toward a restricted section containing diplomatic correspondence. Ambassador Brooks maintained extensive communication records, the archivist explained. Most are available for review. Aracel nodded. Moments later, hundreds of files appeared around her. She began reading. Hours passed unnoticed. The deeper she searched, the more uncomfortable she became. Nathan's name appeared everywhere. Trade negotiations, humanitarian initiatives, infrastructure agreements, cultural exchange programs. Entire sections of imperial policy carried his fingerprints despite rarely mentioning him directly. Then she discovered something else. Personal recommendations, private endorsements, letters written to ministers, governors, and foreign representatives. Nathan had spent years defending people, encouraging careers, resolving misunderstandings before they escalated. Again and again, one name appeared within those records. Aracel Vane. She opened the first file. Then another. Then another. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever political rivals questioned her judgment, Nathan quietly redirected discussions toward solutions. When noble families criticized her inexperience, Nathan highlighted her achievements. When negotiations failed, he accepted blame that should have damaged her reputation instead. He never mentioned these efforts. He never sought recognition. He simply did them. A cold feeling settled inside her chest. Not because she discovered what Nathan had accomplished, because she realized how little she had known about him. Later that evening, Aracel requested a private meeting with Chancellor Vaylor. The elderly advisor listened patiently while she described what she had found. When she finished, he remained silent for several moments. Then he nodded. I wondered when you would discover those records. Aracel stared at him. You knew? Of course. Vaylor folded his hands. Many of us did. The answer stunned her. Why did nobody tell me? The old advisor smiled sadly. Because he asked us not to. Silence followed. Aracel looked away. Through the office windows, the capital city glittered beneath the evening sky. Millions of lights stretched toward the horizon. Why? She asked quietly. Vaylor's expression softened. Because he respected you. The words landed harder than any accusation could have. Respect. Not obligation. Not political strategy. Respect. Aracel remembered the disappointment in Nathan's eyes during their final conversation. For the first time, she understood what made it hurt so much. She had insulted someone who spent years protecting her reputation while asking for nothing in return. And standing beneath the lights of an empire she would one day inherit, Princess Aracel finally began to understand the true cost of words that could never be taken back. For the first time in her life, Princess Aracel began paying attention to things that had always been invisible. Not grand speeches. Not military victories. not ceremonial achievements celebrated across the empire. Small things, quiet things, the sort of contributions people rarely noticed until they disappeared. The realization followed her everywhere. It appeared during council meetings when discussions drifted without direction. It appeared during diplomatic briefings when misunderstandings lasted longer than they should have. It appeared in every empty chair, every unfinished report, every problem that once seemed to resolve itself before becoming serious. Nathan had never made himself the center of anything. That was precisely why his absence felt so large. Several weeks passed. The empire continued functioning. Yet the inefficiencies multiplied. Minor disputes became major distractions. Regional negotiations stalled. Communication between departments slowed. Nothing catastrophic happened. The problem was subtler than that. The palace had lost someone who connected people to one another. Aracel finally noticed the pattern during a trade summit involving 6 neighboring systems. Representatives spent hours debating shipping allocations. Every proposal created new objections. Every compromise generated additional complications. The discussion moved in circles. Then an older diplomat leaned back in frustration and muttered a sentence he clearly had not intended anyone else to hear. Nathan would have solved this by lunch. The room fell silent. Not because the comment was disrespectful, because everyone immediately knew he was right. Aracel lowered her eyes. The meeting continued, yet she barely heard the rest of it. Later that evening, she wandered through the palace gardens alone. Crystal pathways curved between glowing trees imported from distant worlds. Soft lights illuminated pools of still water reflecting the stars above. Normally the gardens provided peace. Tonight they offered reflection. She stopped beside a quiet fountain. Water flowed over polished stone in a continuous silver stream. For several minutes, she simply listened. Then another voice joined the sound of the water. "Your Highness." Aracel turned. Ambassador Kelrin stood a short distance away. He represented one of the Empire's oldest allied worlds and had worked alongside Nathan for years. "Ambassador." Kelrin approached slowly. His expression carried unusual hesitation. "May I speak honestly?" Aracel almost laughed at the question. "I suspect you intend to regardless." The older diplomat smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Silence lingered briefly between them. Then he nodded toward the fountain. "Nathan used to stand here after difficult meetings." Aracel looked away. "I know." Kelrin studied her carefully. "Do you?" The question carried no accusation. Somehow that made it harder to answer. He continued before she could respond. Many people respected Nathan because he was intelligent. The ambassador folded his hands behind his back. They admired him because he solved problems. But that was never the reason people trusted him. Aracel remained silent. People trusted him because he listened. The words settled heavily in the cool evening air. Kelrin looked toward the stars above the gardens. "In 3 years, I never once heard him speak badly about anyone." Aracel closed her eyes briefly. The memory returned immediately. "You are only a human." She could still hear her own voice. Still see the disappointment in his eyes. Not anger. Disappointment. The ambassador eventually excused himself and disappeared down one of the garden pathways. Aracel remained beside the fountain long after he left. The water continued flowing. The stars continued shining. Yet something inside her had changed. For weeks, she had been searching for evidence that Nathan mattered. Now she understood the truth. The reason his absence hurt was not because of what he did for the Empire. It was because of who he had been to the people inside it. And for the first time, Princess Aracel began wondering whether an apology could still matter after silence had lasted this long. The decision took her 3 days. 3 days of unfinished reports, distracted meetings, and sleepless nights beneath the crystal ceilings of the Imperial Palace. 3 days of replaying the same memory. Nathan standing in the Grand Hall. Nathan saying, "I understand, Princess." Nathan walking away. Every version ended the same way. Silence. On the 4th morning, Princess Aracel canceled her scheduled appearances. Advisors protested. Ministers questioned the decision. Security commanders requested explanations. She ignored all of them. For the first time in years, she chose something based on personal conviction rather than political necessity. She was going to find him. The realization felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. By midday, a small transport vessel departed the capital. No royal procession. No ceremonial escort. Only a pilot, 2 security officers, and the future ruler of an empire sitting quietly beside a window. Stars drifted across the darkness outside. Aracel spent most of the journey staring into them. The destination surprised her. Nathan had not returned to Earth. He had not joined another diplomatic mission. He had not accepted offers from rival governments eager to recruit someone with his experience. Instead, he had traveled to a small frontier colony located nearly 3 days from the imperial core. Population, 42,000. Strategic importance, negligible. Political influence, non-existent. The sort of place nobody important ever visited. The transport landed shortly before sunset. Warm orange light stretched across low buildings and agricultural fields. Wind moved through rows of crops surrounding the colony. Service vehicles rolled slowly along dusty roads. The entire settlement felt peaceful, almost stubbornly ordinary. Aracel stepped from the transport and immediately understood why Nathan might choose a place like this. Nobody stared at her. Nobody rushed forward with political requests. Life simply continued. Farmers worked. Children played. Merchants closed shops for the evening. The simplicity felt unfamiliar. A local administrator eventually pointed her toward a small community center near the edge of town. He volunteers there sometimes, the woman explained. Aracel thanked her and continued alone. The building sat beside a public garden overlooking the fields. Soft light glowed through large windows. Voices drifted from inside. Laughter followed. For a moment Aracel stopped walking. Her pulse quickened. She had crossed half the empire. She had prepared speeches, apologies, explanations. Yet standing outside a simple building proved more intimidating than facing entire diplomatic assemblies. Through the window, she finally saw him. Nathan sat at a table surrounded by several local residents. A young child was enthusiastically explaining something involving a model spacecraft constructed from recycled parts. Nathan listened with complete attention. The same attention he once gave emperors, ambassadors, and military commanders. The child finished speaking. Nathan smiled. The child smiled back. Such a small moment. Yet it revealed something important. Nathan looked different. Not happier exactly. Lighter. The constant pressure of imperial politics no longer rested on his shoulders. For the first time since he left, Aracel understood what she had taken from him. Not dignity. Nathan had never lost that. Peace. She stood outside the window for several seconds longer than necessary. Watching. Thinking. Realizing. Then Nathan glanced toward the glass. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Across a quiet frontier colony beneath the fading light of sunset, two people looked at each other for the first time since the day everything changed. And for the first time in weeks, Princess Aracel understood that finding him had only been the beginning. The room gradually emptied. The child with the model spacecraft was called home for dinner. Local residents gathered their belongings and drifted toward the exit. Conversations faded. Laughter disappeared into the evening air. Eventually, only two people remained. Nathan sat at the same table, near the window. Princess Aracel stood just inside the doorway. Neither seemed eager to break the silence first. Outside, the last light of sunset stretched across the fields beyond the colony. The community center felt warm and simple. Wooden tables, local artwork, shelves filled with books and educational materials. Nothing resembled the polished grandeur of an imperial palace. Somehow that made the conversation ahead feel even more difficult. Nathan rose from his chair. Princess. His voice remained calm. Professional. Exactly as she remembered. Aracel swallowed. Nathan. For a moment neither moved. Then Nathan gestured toward an empty table near the window. Would you like to sit? The invitation surprised her. Not because it was extraordinary. Because she was no longer certain she deserved ordinary kindness from him. They sat facing one another. The stars slowly appeared beyond the glass. Several minutes passed before Aracel found the courage to speak. She had rehearsed countless speeches during the journey. None of them seemed useful now. I have been looking for you. Nathan nodded once. I know. The answer caught her off guard. You knew? A faint smile appeared briefly. You are not difficult to track when half the colony starts talking about an imperial transport landing nearby. For the first time in weeks, Aracel almost smiled. The feeling vanished quickly. The reason she came remained sitting heavily between them. Nathan waited patiently. The silence never felt hostile. That somehow made it harder. Finally, she looked down at her hands. I was wrong. The words emerged quietly. Nathan did not interrupt, did not rescue her from the discomfort. Aracel continued. At first I thought I came here because I felt guilty. She paused. That was not the real reason. The room remained still. Outside, wind moved gently through the distant fields. I came because I finally understood what disappeared when you left. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. The reaction lasted less than a second. Yet she noticed it. The Empire kept functioning, she said. The council kept meeting. Everything continued. Her voice grew softer. But nothing felt the same. Nathan looked toward the stars beyond the window. Aracel felt her chest tighten. This was the moment. The truth she had avoided for weeks. When I said those words, her voice faltered. I thought I was speaking to someone beneath me. Silence followed. Nathan never looked away. I was wrong. The statement felt heavier this time. More honest. More complete. You spent years helping people who never thanked you. You protected my reputation when I did not deserve it. You solved problems nobody else even noticed. Her golden eyes lowered. And I repaid that kindness with arrogance. The confession finally hung between them. No excuses. No qualifications. Just truth. Nathan remained silent for several seconds. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. Do you know what hurt most? Aracel looked up. Fear flickered briefly through her chest. Nathan's expression remained calm. Not angry. Not bitter. Simply honest. It was not the insult. The answer surprised her. It was realizing you believed it. The words landed harder than anything else she had heard. Because she knew they were true. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Aracel slowly nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just human. And for the first time since entering the community center, Nathan's expression softened. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The community center had grown completely quiet. Beyond the windows, stars filled the night sky above the frontier colony. Wind moved softly through distant fields. Somewhere far away, a transport engine hummed across the darkness. Inside the room, only two people remained. One carried the weight of regret. The other carried the memory of disappointment. Nathan looked at Aracel for a long time. Not judging, not condemning, simply seeing her. The same way he always had. Eventually, he leaned forward slightly and rested his hands on the table. Do you know why I left? Aracel lowered her eyes. Because of what I said. Nathan shook his head. Partly. The answer surprised her. Nathan glanced toward the stars beyond the glass. I left because I realized you believed I would stay no matter how I was treated. The words were calm, gentle even, yet they carried more truth than anger ever could. Aracel felt them settle heavily inside her chest. Nathan continued. For 3 years I helped the Empire because I believed in what it could become. He smiled faintly. And because I believed in you. The confession made it difficult for her to breathe. Not because it was romantic. Because it was sincere. Nathan had believed in her long before she believed in herself. But respect only works when it moves both directions. Silence followed. Aracel nodded slowly. A simple motion. Yet perhaps the hardest one she had ever made. I know. Nathan studied her for another moment. Then something changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. The distance between them seemed smaller somehow. Less defined. The conversation shifted from accusation toward understanding. They spoke for nearly 2 hours. About the Empire. About mistakes. About expectations neither of them had known how to carry. For the first time, Aracel listened without defending herself. For the first time, Nathan spoke without hiding behind diplomacy. Honesty replaced protocol. The stars continued moving across the sky while old misunderstandings slowly unraveled. Eventually, the conversation reached its natural end. Nathan stood and walked toward the exit. Aracel followed. Outside, the colony rested beneath a sky overflowing with light. Fields stretched toward the horizon. The air smelled faintly of soil and growing crops. Far above them, the distant glow of orbital traffic crossed the darkness. They stopped beside the walkway leading toward the landing field. Neither seemed eager to leave. Finally, Aracel spoke. Will you come back? Nathan looked toward the stars for several seconds before answering. I do not know. The honesty hurt. Yet somehow it also felt fair. Aracel nodded. Then I will have to earn that answer. A small smile appeared on Nathan's face. The first genuine smile she had seen since arriving. That sounds like something a future empress should say. For the first time in weeks, Aracel smiled too. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. Trust required time. Respect required action. Some wounds healed slowly. But hope had returned. And sometimes that was enough. The following morning, the imperial transport departed the colony. Aracel stood near the window watching the fields disappear beneath the clouds. She thought about the empty chair in the council chamber, the unfinished conversations, the empire waiting for her return. Yet she also thought about a quiet human who had taught her something no royal tutor ever had. Power could command obedience. It could not command respect. That had to be earned. Months later, when Princess Aracel entered the grand hall once again, the crystal ceiling reflected 1,000 stars above her. The empire saw a future ruler. Nathan Brooks would have noticed something else. For the first time, she listened before she spoke. And somewhere beyond the imperial core, a human looked up at the same stars and smiled. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not proving someone wrong. It is giving them the chance to become better,